Differentiation is the ability to be your own person while still maintaining connection with others. Family therapist Murray Bowen pioneered this concept, and he defined self-differentiation as setting apart of oneself as distinct from others. It's the ability to recognize your own thoughts and your own feelings and to respect that they might differ from those of the people around you. He said that a well-differentiated person is confident and comfortable being themselves, even when their close friends or family members disagree with how they see their world. And why does this matter? Well, if you've ever felt lost in a relationship or found yourself saying yes to things in order to please others, even if internally you're saying no, then you've experienced the challenge of being poorly differentiated. People with low differentiation often either merge with others, go along with whatever others want, kind of that go along to get along, or they swing to the opposite extreme and they push others away in order to avoid being influenced or made to feel bad about their own opinions or perspectives. They might change their opinions quickly to get approval or try to dominate and control the conversation and what others are thinking. Both extremes are a sign that this person isn't truly acting from their own secure, steady, stable, authentic self. For a person who is poorly self-differentiated, they may also run to others to accommodate them at the expense of their own happiness, which can lead to resentment, anxiety, and a sense that your life really isn't your own. Another way of looking at poor self-differentiation is somebody who is so steeped in their beliefs and their opinions that they can't even hear the beliefs or opinions of those they supposedly love and care about because they see that as a threat to who they are. But on the flip side, having strong self-differentiation means that you can maintain your individuality without cutting off your relationships. You can say no when you need to without feeling guilt or feeling rejection. Bowen noted that a well-differentiated individual can stay calm and clear-headed in the face of conflict or criticism instead of instantly reacting emotionally or surrendering their viewpoint. Instead, you're able to reflect and act based on your values, your principles, and your genuine beliefs. You won't disown your values just to keep the peace, but you also won't reflexively fight or rebel in order to assert your independence and your individuation. This balanced mindset of I am me and I'm also connected with you is healthy for both personal well-being and relationships. In fact, there is research that says highly enmeshed families where nobody is really allowed to be different tend to have a lot more anxiety and turmoil in the members of the family. Whereas families that encourage individual voices often adapt to stress more smoothly. When I'm explaining the concept of differentiation to clients, I'll usually say, we have these two needs. I mean, we have a lot more needs than just two, but two of our needs are this need to belong to the self and the need to belong to other. And whatever that other is, right? It can be our family of origin. It may be our partner. It can be our group of friends. It could be a religious organization. The other can be all of these things. And if belonging to yourself and belonging to other is an alignment, then we don't typically have a problem. The problems arise when belonging to the self starts to contradict or cause conflict in belonging to the other. We will feel cognitive dissonance, and we can use confirmation bias to come in and decide, okay, well, here's what I was taught. And, I was taught to be agreeable, or I was taught to not make others uncomfortable. And so I will manage this cognitive dissonance by doing, what has been confirmed to me. They'll go along to get along, or cause a big blow up and leave that group, leave that person, sever the relationship. Now, obviously, when we're small, the need to belong to other is pretty important for our survival. And so while we may initially prioritize, this isn't necessarily a thought process, but there might be a priority on belonging to other, meaning mom, dad, family, whatever that looks like, we will prioritize belonging to the other. And at some point, sometimes with the permission of parents, the process of individuation starts to surface. We need to start to develop this sense of self that may be influenced by the messages that we got, or might start to contradict with the messages that we got. Having raised 4 kids into adulthood, I would say, I think the process of individuation starts as a teen. And we see this in a lot of different ways where teens are wanting to start that process of belonging to self, but they're not entirely able to fully differentiate. And that's okay. There's not a rush to finish this process of differentiation. I think this process is a continually evolving one as we have different experiences and are exposed to different thoughts and processes. We may be updating who we are as a person and the people that we belong to. Sometimes when I think about teens, I think of my youngest daughter, who she was born early. She was born about 4.5 weeks early. Spent the first 2 weeks of her life in the NICU. She had some type of infection when she was born. I've told her that story since she was young and how, she came into this world having to fight, even to stay alive. And she's been, I would say who she is that has been shaped by that early fight in her life. And she can be the fighter. She can be the feisty girl who will speak up and say what she's thinking. She doesn't hesitate to say it, even if it goes against what she knows other people might be thinking. And so I've told her a lot. I know you were born as a fighter and you didn't have a choice. You had to fight, but you also don't have to attend every fight that you're invited to. And part of your challenge in life will be to figure out which battles are worth taking on and which battles you just let it go by and you're no worse for wear. She's 22 now, so she's still in that process of figuring that out. When she was in high school and her friend had moved in, I think this was after her friend had moved in. So they were going to go on a hike up in the mountains. And it was probably in the fall, but it was maybe 5:30 at night that they wanted to head out. Could have been 6 o'clock at night. They wanted to head out. And it's going to start getting dark. My husband, her dad was like, well, I don't know if that's a great idea to be heading out in the mountains when it's dark. Do you have a flashlight? He got him a flashlight. But he was also saying, I don't think this is a very good idea. And she turned to the two of us and said, well, we have this flashlight. Lillian has her mace and I have my attitude. So I think we're going to be just fine. And I laugh about that still, thinking of her, because especially when she was in high school, I would say that was the pinnacle of her attitude. And I said to her, yeah, you're right. Your attitude might keep you safe in this situation. Whoever tries to kidnap you would bring you right back to our front door and be like, here, she's yours. So I just don't know that teens are fully able to complete that process of differentiation. I think it even expands in our 20s. Coming into our 30s, I think hopefully we have a better sense of who we are because we've had some experiences as an adult in this world that shapes and impacts us. And these things are happening outside of our home or outside of family of origin. So let's talk now about the concept of individuation, which is closely related to differentiation. Individuation is essentially the developmental journey of becoming an individual. With this goes developing your own identity, your values, your life path, separate from the identities that were imposed by your parents or your peers or society or various organizations. The famous psychologist Carl Jung described individuation as the process of self-realization, discovering one's meaning and purpose in life, and becoming who one really is. He said that this is a lifelong journey of integrating all the parts of yourself and ultimately fulfilling your unique potential. In the context of family and society, individuation often means that as we grow, especially in the years of adolescence and young adulthood, we start to figure out what we truly think and what we truly want, which may or may not align with what our family or our culture expects. This can be a tricky process. It's not about simply rebelling, although this is a time period in which, depending on how parents are responding to this developmental need for individuation, it can lead to extreme rebellion. However, individuation itself is not rebellion for its own sake, just to rebel. Instead, it's about honestly coming into your own. Healthy individuation results in a person who can stand on their own principles and pursue their own goals while still maintaining respect, love, and connection with others. These two terms, differentiation and individuation, often go together. Individuation being the process of coming into your own, being your own person and belonging to you. Differentiation meaning exploring the differences between you and the other. If pursued in healthy, adaptive ways, this person wouldn't be isolated or selfish, but they would develop a solid sense of self that can't just be swept away by the currents of other people's opinion or their needs or the group. Instead, it's finding that sweet spot between connection and autonomy. I think it's worth noting that differentiation doesn't mean a lack of care or a lack of morality. In fact, just the opposite. A well-differentiated person can choose to be compassionate and cooperative out of a genuine principle or out of love rather than guilt and blind conformity. For example, you might volunteer your time to help others or make sacrifices for your family. If you're doing it with a clear sense of choice and principle, that's very different from doing it just because you can't say no. Sure, one can act selflessly, but acting in the best interest of the group actually is a thoughtful choice. It's not just a response to relationship pressures. And this is differentiation in action. The freedom to care for others without losing yourself. How do you begin to develop greater differentiation in your own life? Or in other words, how can you become more yourself while still being a loving parent or a partner or child? Striking that balance of self and others is a journey, but there are practical steps to get started. One of the first steps when I'm working with a client is to cultivate self-awareness and start to move towards a solid sense of self. So usually step one starts with self-awareness, and that also includes self-awareness of how they developed who they are and whether that's working for them or not. And starting to progress toward this solid sense of self is going to take some time. I think it's really important to start by getting to know your own thoughts, feelings, and values. Sometimes I work with clients and I would say they're more in that stage where they're looking at rules and this is what's true. They're still in that black and white perspective. And that's fine. But I might ask them, why don't you make a list of those truths that guide your life? I'm trying to move that into a guiding principle and starting to connect them to their values. Instead of looking at rules that somebody else created or truth that has been given to them, let's make this personal. Let's look at this for you. What can you distill from this? I'll say to them, oftentimes we find that when we're pursuing truth, there might be some big T truths, like the law of gravity, for example. You don't have to believe in the law of gravity, but if you throw something up, it might come down and hit you on the head. Other times we're dealing with small T truths, things that are true for me. Maybe not 100% of the time, but more often than not. And when I come across those expectations, I've made an allowance for that. Now, this might sound obvious, but it is easy for people to go on autopilot, automatically adapting their opinions or their desires of those around them, their parents, their family, their church, their community. So we need to make this intentional. We need to create some time to reflect about, what do I really think? What is my life experience taught me? How do I feel in this particular situation? This process can help us start to tune into our own inner voice. Psychologists will talk about developing a solid sense of self, which means that you know who you are and what you believe in, independently of external approval. For example, if you realize that you truly love jazz music, even if your friends hate it, you honor that knowledge. And maybe you also find people who love jazz music. A solid self is flexible. It can be adaptable. You can hear others' viewpoints, but you're not automatically swayed. Practicing mindfulness and meditation can also strengthen individual ability to stay centered in your own experience. The goal is to reach a point where you know your worth and your truth, regardless of the feedback that you get from others. I would say that's one of the first things to start working towards. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is this process is going to require that you set boundaries. Sometimes we start with small ones. If you're used to always pleasing others, a small boundary would be to start asserting your needs. Sometimes we have to actually identify what those needs are or what those preferences are. But this could be as simple as telling a friend, actually, I can't meet on Tuesday. I need a night to myself. Or just saying, actually, I can't make it work on Tuesday. Can we make it work on Thursday? It could also be, in this day and age of connection on demand, is what I call it, with texting and cell phone usage, it might look like not answering a non-urgent phone call during times that you've set aside for your family or for you or for work. Setting boundaries helps us start to practice when to say no, which is really important to develop. And also when we truly say yes. And sometimes that can be a real struggle because we grew up with these ideas of boundaries that in our family, those boundaries weren't necessarily accepted. You can't ignore your mom's phone call. That's rude. That's hurtful. She might get mad and mom's feelings will be hurt. And you would be in the wrong for doing that. Even if it was for a good reason, it doesn't matter. So you might need to start looking at that differently, to start to think for yourself. What do I think about this? How can I include what mom wants? You might say, hey, mom, it's not about being rude. I'm not trying to respect you. I'm at work and I'm unavailable, or I'm only available for crises. Setting boundaries will usually feel uncomfortable at first. The guilt usually comes up, the feeling of letting others down, which is why it's important to start small and start to see that loved ones can respect this, depending on how they want to interpret it. Their interpretation isn't necessarily true or right. It's just their interpretation. They could interpret it differently, and that may start with you interpreting it differently and reminding yourself that you have a right to your time. You have a right to your energy. It isn't about being bad or being selfish. It's about setting reasonable limits that allow you to protect your relationships from hidden resentments down the line or a lack of transparency down the line. I think it's also important to embrace honest communication. Differentiation doesn't mean just silently doing your own thing. It also involves communicating openly with those that you love about who you are and how you work. And this can be challenging if you've been hiding your opinions or your needs. And instead, you've just been going along to get along on the surface while doing something else that's hidden. So it might start with a small expression of your feelings or your thoughts on a matter. Gently, but truthfully. For example, instead of pretending that you're okay with a plan you actually really don't like, and just thinking to yourself, I'll just go along with this. And when the day comes, I'll cancel or I'll say I'm sick. I think a lot of people do that. But instead you might say, hey, I know this is really important to you, but I feel uncomfortable about this part. Or I know you put a lot of planning into this, but I'm not able to do this part. Use I statements so that you're owning your perspective without blaming, without making it seem like they were wrong. You're not going to say something like, I can't believe you would put this in the plan or the agenda. But it's also important that you let them know that you have a right for not wanting to do that. And you'll own that. It will feel vulnerable, but it is a way of letting people see the real you. And the payoff is that you have more genuine relationships. The people in your life actually get to know you, not just this mirror of themselves. Oftentimes, you might be surprised and find that they respect you more because they know who you are. And even if they have different opinions, that's okay. We can tolerate a loved one's disappointment or disagreement. It might be a muscle that will need to be built in order to develop differentiation. But you will usually learn that the relationship can handle some differences. If you think about it, the strongest relationships out there do not just allow, but require each person to be their own individual, distinct self. I've worked with a lot of couples who came together and their initial connection was over sameness. And at a certain ages, yeah, we are valuing sameness. That's who we know. That's who we hang out with. How we get to know people. We're in the same group. We go to the same church. We have the same beliefs. We believe the same. We talk the same. We sound the same. And so we get into a relationship. But as we start to mature and differentiation continues to develop, the sameness may not stay. Really, the sameness shouldn't stay. Sometimes it is technically threatening to how the relationship started because it is changing. It's evolving. It's not going to be what it was. It's not necessarily a threat to the relationship. If the other person can't adapt, it might be, but it isn't a guarantee that it is. Which takes us to another step that's important, and that is to start practicing, as we're navigating differentiation, how to manage reactivity. It's important to stay calm and grounded. A big part of differentiation is emotional self-regulation. When conflicts or differences arise, notice that maybe there is some anxiety or there's some anger. Instead of just reacting to that emotion in the heat of the moment, or surrendering your position out of fear or blowing up in defense of your situation, you take a breather, whether that's taking a deep breath, counting to 10, or taking a short break and being able to regulate yourself and then come back. The idea is to remain present and engaged without melting down and without shutting down. So again, this might involve practicing mindfulness, having some mantras on board, reminding yourself that their emotions aren't necessarily a threat to you. You don't have to absorb them. You don't have to fix them. You don't have to manage them. And you don't have to agree with them. Now, if this is your partner, you have to show up as their partner. If this is a friend, you need to show up as a friend once you're emotionally regulated. When we can emotionally regulate, we can hear the other person better and also stay true to what we need to say. It's really hard to be yourself if you're emotionally flooded or if you're in panic and anxiety mode about someone being angry or somebody disagreeing with you or being hurt by you. So practice and build your self-soothing abilities. You might have to develop a mantra like, I can handle hard things. I can handle differences. Differences are a way of connecting. Differences are a different way of connecting. Over time, these skills that you practice can help you remain calm. It might help others start to emotionally regulate, which leads to more constructive exchanges instead of screaming matches or silent treatment and ghosting. Continue to practice empathy and concern for your loved ones while also advocating an equal place for yourself. In any healthy relationship, whether that's a marriage, a friendship, or a parent-child relationship, there should be room for two whole people. Getting curious and asking for more context around the situation. Tell me why this is so important to you. Tell me what you're hearing me say. Tell me what you think that means. Usually we can find our way through when we understand the individual core needs or core fears or dreams or desires or wants that are coming up in that situation. This is essentially being able to practice what Carol Gilligan called the integrated care perspective in everyday life. If you've come from a place of people-pleasing, being prioritized, self-sacrificing, it's going to be important to spend time practicing saying yes to yourself. Now, this phrase might strike a chord if you tend to always say yes to others. Saying yes to yourself means giving yourself permission to do what nourishes you, even if that might mean saying no to someone. Like, I've never loved New Year's resolutions, but I did like the idea of marking the new year some way. So I would pick a word in January that was inspiring to me or that I felt like I needed to be reminded of. Now, sometimes in May or July, I found, oftentimes actually, I found that I had to update that word. So there was this year when my kids were, maybe my oldest were reaching close to the middle school years. And I don't remember what word I had picked in January, but what the year turned out to be, it was a year of me being able to practice and having to say no to things. No to others, no to obligations, no to expectations. The next year, I found, again, maybe halfway through the year, that actually what this year was requiring of me was saying yes, which, yeah, looking back, I'm like, duh, how did I not see that coming? That a year of learning to say no would be followed by a year of me saying yes about things that I wanted to do. And I do think that having a year where I was verbalizing and saying no to things actually cleared some space for me to say yes to the things that really mattered. And a lot of the things that I said yes to scared me. I could come up with a whole list of reasons why no was the answer. Looking back, I think I said no to the right things. And then it kind of hit me, oh, that was clearing the way for me to actually say yes to things. And I found that actually saying yes was harder than saying no. Saying no wasn't easy, but saying yes was a little bit more difficult. It felt more vulnerable. It felt scary because it was opening up to possibilities. I grew up being told no a lot. You can't do that. No, you can't have that. No, we don't have money for that. No, that's wrong. So actually for me, practicing the yeses was a bigger stretch. Changing lifelong patterns of relating can be hard, and it's okay to get help. Seeking professional help from a therapist who works with family systems or relational therapy. If you're wanting to work with a professional on differentiation, those would be some things you're looking for in their bios. Sometimes that might involve bringing your partner in so that they can understand what you're trying to do and they're not feeling threatened by the changes that are happening. It's important to remember that differentiation is a gradual process. We don't just automatically flip a switch overnight. And it might cause some friction as others and you adjust to the new you, who might not be quite as people-pleasing or self-sacrificing or acquiescent as before. Stay the course and be kind and firm. Over time, the relationships that can support you in differentiation will find a new equilibrium. And for the other relationships that can accept this differentiated self, you'll find that they might fade. They might self-select out, which, difficult as it might be, may actually be for the best and allow for more genuine connections to come into your life. I want to spend a few minutes talking about false differentiation. If we don't have this solid enough sense of self, we are going to look for substitutes. False differentiation describes this pseudo-independence when someone believes they're asserting individuality, but in reality, their identity is defined by their group or by opposition to another group. Pseudo-independence is usually an extreme reaction against dependence rather than true independence. Simply doing the opposite of what others expect is not genuine autonomy. Bowen's theory of family systems noted that an extreme rebel is a poorly differentiated person as well. But they pretend to be a self by routinely opposing the positions of others. Individuals, including public figures, can loudly claim that they're free thinkers or that they're Christians or that they've broken from the crowd, when in reality, they've just really aligned with a different crowd, or they took a different stance because it's the polar opposite of their rivals. Religious identity and your political identity should be an expression of who you are as a person, not as a substitute for that sense of self. Political affiliation isn't the only sphere where this phenomenon occurs. Religious identity and shifts in a person's belief can also involve false differentiation. So, a classic scenario, the rebellious youth who breaks away from their family's faith tradition, proclaiming they're forging their own spiritual path, when in reality, their choices are really about defying their parents and this religious institution or this religious voice, rather than pursuing their own genuine spiritual convictions. On the surface, they might be differentiating themselves. But if their new identity is essentially anything that this religion said no to, or anything that my parents hate, then the parents are still unwittingly controlling the person's choice. They haven't actually developed an independent self and are just locked in this reactive stance. Therapists will often warn that when someone leaves a strict or neglectful upbringing, they are prone to adopting pseudo-independence, which is just doing the opposite of what their family or their religious group did as a reaction, rather than healing and discovering their true sense of self. The motivation is often still tied to the original group. As Bowen describes, a differentiated self can reject others' views without polarizing the differences and support others' views without becoming a disciple. In contrast, the falsely differentiated individual is enmeshed in polarization. Isn't that a good description? They are enmeshed in polarization. They either merge with their in-group's mentality or they take a knee-jerk opposite stance to another group. Their actions are interdependent with the very people they claim not to follow. And these patterns are going to fail to foster authentic personal growth because the person isn't truly discovering and developing their own internal identity. Instead, they're doing a superficial inversion of someone else's. When people are operating from a stance of automatic opposition or in-group allegiance, genuine communication breaks down. Constructive dialogue requires open-mindedness, empathy, and curiosity. These are qualities that allow a person to listen and even update or adjust their views in light of new information. The pseudo-independent stance is inherently closed-minded. It says, I've already made my mind up that your side is wrong and that my side is right. Encounters between two falsely differentiated opponents devolves into what we see so much in our society today, whether that's online or in person, where we're talking past each other, we're trading slogans or one-upmanship rather than having an honest exchange. The last area I want to discuss with false differentiation is looking for a relationship. For some of my clients, they're single, they start dating, they may not have a solid enough sense of self developed in order to go into vulnerable situations like dating, being attracted to somebody, hoping somebody's attracted to them, and getting to know each other. And often that yearning to be accepted for who you are starts to be fulfilled by this person, which shifts it from an internal desire to be accepted for who I am as a person, being accepted and respected, and it starts to shift to wanting to be accepted by you. And then the person will begin to do what the other thinks is right, or what they want or need you to be. And now we've shifted from starting from this internal place and shifting it to the external and hoping that translates internally. And we know that's not going to work. Another person cannot love us enough to give us our sense of self. And they can certainly cause damage to the sense of self that is starting to develop. So I wrap up here with differentiation theory and the concept of individuation. They both teach us the value of becoming a distinct self. For you right now, walking the path of differentiation might mean some daily small victories, such as voicing a different opinion, envisioning a different path for your life, or discovering that your friend still likes you when you say no. It might be envisioning a life that's different than the one that was set out for you. whether that was through trauma or parents' hopes and dreams for you. It has to align with who you are and what you want for yourself. Sometimes I will have clients ask, what's wrong with being who my parents want me to be? I think this question assumes there's only one way you as an individual can be. And it bypasses the discovery process of you determining who you are, of you knowing that this is who I am, not who my parents want me to be. Each time you assert your true self with kindness, you're strengthening that individuation muscle. You're proving to yourself that you can be independent and connected. It's a lifelong journey. Even Carl Jung saw individuation as a process that continues throughout life. And he said it's also a rewarding one. The more you become who you really are, the more meaning and purpose you'll likely feel. And the more your relationships will be based on genuine love and understanding, not fear, not facades. When you stand as a self-defined person, you're actually in a better position to love and to listen because you're not driven by anxiety or approval seeking. You're driven by your values, your guiding principles. Remember, this is not an either or process. It's a both and. By balancing the needs and wants of yourself with those of the people you love, you're not just finding personal freedom, you will be creating healthier, more resilient relationships.